So, issue 4 really focuses on the darkness and the fact that Wolverine goes seeking his own shadow because he feels there's no balance, because there's no darkness in Krakoa. And I want to reiterate there is a difference between the darkness and our shadows, okay? Darkness is just the natural polarity of light, and Krakoa doesn't have the other end of the good stuff, which is unnatural. Internally, it's demonizing the dark that turns it into our shadows, like when we don't want to own up to feelings of anger, jealousy, rejection, and so on. A lot of people's egos get caught up with trying to switch the narrative if they're the ones who got rejected, or amplifying the narrative if they're the ones rejecting because it soothes our ego, right? And we've all been on both ends in some way. But if it helps to say you broke up first or you said fuck off first, then go ahead and relish in that. The real win will show in what you choose to learn from each relationship and if you carry those lessons over to your present moment. And this is Wolverine's current struggle. So now we can talk about constantly having to experience pain in order to learn. So Wolverine is right about Krakoa lacking balance, but he notices it so much because it's also very uncomfortable for him. He's on the opposite side of that. He represents people who are used to being in pain so much that experiencing the healthy aspects can be foreign, and it's perceived as boring even sometimes. And the dangerous part about that is that we're not conscious of it when that happens. This is why we subconsciously attract toxic partners and friends, because they reflect a wound that we're already sitting in. So even though he's like, I see a better future and I have a purpose now, he still falls back into the darkness because it's just what he's used to. But imagine being programmed all your life, whatever age you're at. But imagine being programmed all your life, whatever age you're at now. Do you really think that all those years are going to be undone with one thought of awareness in a short period of time? This is what happens when we don't do the internal work. And so Wolverine says, I let my guard down. There is no escape. He's talking about the people trying to kill him, but it's also reflecting himself because he then says the past is catching up to him. So he thought he could just say, I believe in a better future and it was going to happen without internally dealing with the past. You can run, but you can't hide from yourself. And even Omega Red says, darkness is our truth and I came to drink the pain. And now we're getting closer to how the vampires really tie in. But I really want to focus on this for a second because it's a real thing, right? We don't notice how polluted our ocean is until we step back to see from a larger perspective. And sometimes even when we do the internal work, it's so much different to then implement it into our actions and our interactions. So now we're tying it back in with memories. If losing memories through past life deaths and resurrection through eggs doesn't resonate with you, here they give us a real life example. They say there's something about not being able to remember, and that's why drinking is so good to numb the pain. So, we all have our vices and ways of trying to escape and forget, whether that's drinking, smoking, overworking, anything that keeps the mind busy, distracted. And Wolverine's now feeling the effects of the holes in his memories. As drinking helps numb past memories, so do these eggs, but does that mean that it's truly gone? So Wolverine wants to be a better person, but he feels undeserving deep down. And he is getting there because he acknowledges that his judgment towards Omega Red is a reflection of the part of him that he demonizes within himself. Okay, so now that I've gone through polarities and projections in detail, we can now see how this is reflected through the rest of the storyline. So let's start with the vampires. Vampires sustain themselves by consuming the life force of living creatures. Are you just alive or are you living? And this is a matter of heart and soul and not anything tangible. They're dead because they're running on programming. They're controlled by Dracula. That's why Wolverine says he's going to take down the whole machine. Talking about the Flower Cartel and Dracula, who represents a matrix in a sense. He's the voice in their head making them do things, but there are these group of vampires who don't want to kill, but they can't help that they're hungry and hollow. So they eat other things. So the vampires can't help but want to feed, it's just how they've been programmed. So the few vampires who are aware of the Dracula voice, they don't know how to get out. They're afraid of the sun, just like Wolverine, who's always drawn to the darkness because the light is too much for him. So Wolverine's blood type is E for endless, I say eternal, and they literally show us the polarity between him and the vampires. So they say that they belong to the same group but different type, one negative and one positive. So he has the blood of the eternal, but it also resembles the blood of the infected or cursed. Wolverine's the physical representation of our infinite spirit, and so are the vampires. But which eternal being are you going to claim? That's the question. Are you going to be afraid of the sun, of the light, to the point where you're always living in the darkness and experiencing pain, needing others to provide energy for you, searching for external accomplishments and validations to feel whole? Wolverine's alive, but he can still resonate with the vampires who need the darkness, and he's considered as undead still. So this is basically asking, are you sure you're alive? And of course, we can be on the opposite side of that as well, where we stay in the light and just avoid the darkness, kind of like everyone who's completely okay with Krakoa. There's a lot of power in recognizing yourself as an infinite being, as an eternal being. And Dracula even talks about this and says Wolverine's blood has strength and wisdom. When you're one of the undying, you realize how vulnerable and impermanent life is. So the last polarity is the one between the Order of X and the mutant hate group. The Order of X worships the mutants, they see them as the new god, and they're at the extreme of being a cult and eating their flesh, right? And they definitely represent how religion is formed. And on the other end of that, we have the mutant hate group, and they really get into details about why they hate mutants so much, so we get to see their pain and their struggles and why they'd have such a negative perception on mutants. None of this excuses the behaviors of all the craziness of any of them, but it's just displaying how natural polarity is and how we simply don't have to play into it. You don't need to worship the mutants, but you don't need to hate them either. So when this hate group goes to kill Wolverine, we further see how undeserving he truly feels as he says, you know what, do whatever you want to me because I deserve it. But he also states, we're trying to do better. So one destructive mutant doesn't speak for the rest, just like one destructive human doesn't speak for the rest. The very last thing I want to end on is this theory on being rich, where they basically say that if you're good, then being rich makes you better, but if you're bad, then it makes you worse. They compare the gift of resurrection because a taste of more can lead to bottomless thirst, to feeling invincible, to where no life matters but your own. So, this is why I was saying earlier about the importance of being connected with self before prioritizing anything external. So Wolverine says he's known the polluted darkness of the vampires, and if it comes for Krakoa, then it could tear us apart. Again, polarities. Vampire is all shadows and Krakoa is all sparkles and light. So what's their commonality? They're both blinded by one extreme, blindly following a system, a program, which we all have power over once we start to take accountability. So this isn't about taking down the system and escaping the matrix. The matrix just is what it is. But our job is to balance the extremes, follow our map, our own path, our intuition, our gut, our heart. And this is where it goes back to Powers of X and House of X and all this eternal thirst that Magneto is on, right? I don't know if I'm going to do the giant size X-Men on Magneto, but notice how he destroys the choice between the crystal and the shell. He doesn't choose. He breaks the duality by not choosing. Even with being rich, we're told that we have to choose creating a legacy or having happiness. And often we either end up on one extreme of chasing money and legacy or on the other where we see how it creates evil, so we don't even want anything to do with that. Any choices and dualities that we have to fight and be stuck between, if we look hard enough, we can decide, I'm not choosing, I want it all. That's why I say the purpose of integrating self and spirit and recognizing our wholeness, that entire self love healing journey, is so important because that is our legacy. Through that process, we discover the gift that we have to offer the world, and that's what inevitably becomes our legacy when we're on our soul, SOUL, soul purpose. Magneto can come through like a badass to fuck shit up every day, but he's chasing after legacy through ego, so we'll see how that turns out. Okay? All right, butterflies, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope this all made sense. I hope you enjoyed my analysis. Stay flying free, and I'll see you next time. Bye.